Okay, sorry about that. Um, so yeah, a school. It had me thinking about how, well, it had me thinking about how when I was in school, I hated it and it felt like a prison. I hated it and it felt like a prison. And I was real rebellious against it. I was rebellious against, like, I could learn stuff very quickly. Um, and I retain stuff pretty well. I have a pretty good memory. I have a photographic memory. And, uh, you know, I could retain things pretty okay, but I just was, plus I was at Christian schools too, so it's not like I was learning that much to begin with outside of about religion. Um, and it was all just I was just brainwashed the entire time, which is in part why I was shutting it off and not wanting to pay attention and not being that involved. But at the same time, there were things to learn that I didn't learn because it just felt like I was in a prison. But at the same time, like, it wasn't just that, right? There was something about me just as a kid growing up and stuff too. Like, I really needed more um, physical learning. I needed to be outdoors more. Like, I would do those things. Thankfully, when I wasn't at school, I was very much into those things. But, like, had I had not been kept in a church basement, for 8 hours a day, every day of the week, and multiple hours through on the weekend, um, every single week of my life from the time that I was, 8 until I was 18. Um, I mean, I went to bigger schools. I went to a lot of different schools, but essentially that was like the concept of what was happening, and I probably would have benefited greatly. But what that looked like for me, and that's fine. I mean, to a degree, I would have benefited, but in a different way, right? What I'm receiving through the concept of, considering it to be a prison when it was actually a school sort of deal, was the fact that by the time that I was in my 20s, because I hadn't paid attention in school, because I didn't give a fuck, by the time I was in my 20s, I suddenly realized, like, oh, I don't really know shit. And then I realized, like, oh, I wasn't really even going to know shit to begin with, and now I know even less shit because I was fucking off. So I took responsibility for that, and thankfully at the time, like, YouTube had come out and been back in its early days, like, all anything there wasn't the same structured what's it called, like, policing, I guess, that there is now, security measures and stuff like that there is now, that made it so that a lot of different crazy stuff, I'm sure, was on there. But what I was using it for was education. And at the time, like, I was able to access college courses and professors giving seminars and, like, all of this different form of engagement just through Google and YouTube, which were still very new at that time. Google was a little bit older. YouTube was newer, I believe. But yeah, I mean, me and my brother had taught me, even when I was very young. We got a computer when I was, about 8, 9. And I wasn't allowed to use it. I wasn't even supposed to be on it, like, even prior to that. But I was, and I was looking at porn. But I digress. At that young age, yeah. But my brother, had gotten me into, like, these conspiracy theories. He first got into UFOs and the paranormal, and that turned into believing those things to be of a demonic nature, which led him into learning about secret societies and different, satanic cults and witchcraft and, like, all of these different types of things. And he would use me as, like, his go-to to discuss those types of things outside of with his best friend, who he was, like, learning stuff with, and then he'd come and he'd discuss these things to me, and he was essentially teaching me a lot of things. And then even when I was very young, even when I was, like, 12 to 14, we would go to the library and we would get books and we would learn things. We would also get, like, CDs and stuff, but, like, we were learning about a lot of these different conspiracies and secret societies and stuff like that all the way back then. And that was before anybody else was really talking about these things, especially, or at least in our more sheltered reality, being in Christian schools and stuff like that, being in church and stuff like that. At the same time, back then, those were the spaces where those things tended to be communicated more, because those were the people that were talking about how like there's this secret satanic cabal that runs the world that like is trying to take over, and it's all against Jesus, and we got to hold on to Jesus in order to, you know, Jesus is going to come back and get rid of all of this, because they're trying to create a one world government, and we're trying to, you know, and they believe in a new world, and we're trying to hold to these like old standards. There's so much enmeshment of theology and brainwashing tactics in what I just said, because that's what I was taught and that was what we were prescribing to. But ultimately, like, yeah, those spaces were back then the spaces where you would hear about those. Even now, I guess that's still how it works. But nowadays, like, more people hear those types of things. You hear about it on the news. You hear people talking about it over social media more than anything, right? And so, like, I don't know. I was well aware of those things when I was growing up. And by the time that I could for myself and was, like, in the mode to educate myself and to learn, you know, the way the world actually works and what's really going on and what is my purpose here as an individual and a person, you know, because it just never felt like I was learning those things, or it actually felt like I was actively being blocked from those things. So that like became this drive for education. And that's why I'm very thankful for so much of the limited, I was overly exposed to trauma, and then I had limited experiences as far as like general social norms, but that benefited me because it drove me to want to understand those things as I became an adult, to want to be able to fit into some degree, to be a functioning member of society, where my brothers still haven't learned that. They fell back into these cult mentalities, and now they have 7 and 8 kids apiece or whatever, and like are homeschooling them and raising them in like this very closed, sheltered reality, just similarly to how we were raised. And you know, I'm very thankful to not be entrapped to the same concepts that they adhere to and that they use to, you know, validate their own sense of selves while invalidating everybody else. I'm very thankful to not be in that place. I'm thankful to have this capacity and desire to want to learn more, to understand more, to be willing to change, to be willing to go through all of these experiences. That has been nothing but a gift and has truly benefited me, as much as it didn't always feel that way. So I'm very thankful for those things. And like, so that's, you know, that's like the beginning of where this came from, which is that it's all about alchemy. It really, really is. But that's because of the nature of our experience. Existence is innate. The experience of it is a gift and a, you know, in order to be able to experience reality rather than just be a gear in that whole mechanism, we had to become separated from God. We had to become separated from our highest selves. We had to become separated from experience itself in order to conceive it properly, in order to see it. You know, I've gone through these things with people, and I've mentioned it, I'm sure, in my different videos. But like, when you're looking in a mirror, you see yourself, but you also don't, and you're never going to be able to. You have to be able to look inwardly in order to truly see yourself. Because when I look at a mirror, in order to wave my right hand, my reflection is waving its left hand in order to mimic what it is that I'm doing, because I'm looking at myself. If it were actually a true reflection of myself, it would be facing backwards and doing the same thing I'm doing. But the point of the mirror isn't to reflect you, it's to be able to reveal your reflection, right? And so like, if I happen to catch like my reflection in the mirror and glance at my reflection in the mirror and realize that like my makeup's all fucked up, or my face looks silly, or like my hair's out of place, different things like that allows you to be able to make those adjustments, right? But there was this experiment done where they put a giant mirror into the living quarters of different wild animals at a zoo, and had them just kind of come upon it. Like, they didn't make a big thing of it, they just put it in there, and then they just watched how these different animals responded. And like little animals to big animals, including like lions, gorillas, bears, like armadillos, like all these different types of animals, like would see the reflection, and because one, they weren't anticipating it, they'd be startled by it, but also just because they had never conceived of that concept, right? So like, to see the reflection, the initial response is always to assume that must be somebody else. There's another bear in here. What is that lion doing? There's like this, and we do that ourselves. When experience puts a mirror in front of us, our initial response is always, until we know ourselves well enough to recognize ourselves when we see ourselves in that mirror. But prior to ever being able to recognize ourselves, the first time we see ourselves, we assume that must be somebody else. No, that's not me. It's like that same concept of when you drink your own medicine. What is it? Like, take a taste of your own medicine. The initial response is like, oh, this shit is toxic. But that's because we're so unaware of ourselves to begin with, right? And that was essential in being able to truly understand ourselves. It was innate. That is the point of the singularity, is to define all that isn't us in order to define what we truly are. And so there needed to be this separation between us and our God, in order to our God, like our whole Godhood, like the connection that we have to everything, everyone, every aspect of existence. Experience separated us from it so that we could look at it in the third person and be able to conceive of it. The only reason that I'm able to do my makeup a certain way is because I'm looking in a mirror. So like the way that we learn how to build off of ourselves has been through that process of creating these mirrors, of experience being a mirror for existence. Which, like, I had this saying back, like, when I, at this point it was like almost 15 years ago. But I would say, and I probably, yeah, I think I started saying it in high school and didn't really know what I was saying. I would have it was like in a poem that I wrote, but then it became part of my random mantras and shit like that, which is that life is a metaphor. Life is a metaphor. Like existence itself is a metaphor for life is a metaphor for existence. Life is a metaphor for everything else. And that's like rolled into this, like, everything is actually everything. Everything consumes everything and then turns it into everything else. Everything is constantly producing everything. It's all connected. But our perception is a matter of personal experience, and that is something quite personal. Everything is experiencing itself, but the concept of experience is innately personal, right? And so that also comes down to, like, when I didn't take advantage of everything I was learning in school, despite what little I was learning to some degree, but like, I also didn't take advantage of everything I was learning as much as I could have, because I was viewing it as a prison, and like a rabid dog in a cage. It was like, I just can't wait to get out of here. Instead of like making the most of it, those that go to actual prison and it does what it's supposed to do, those are the ones that like become better people in prison. It happens all the time, but it almost has become like, it's not the normal concept. The normal concept is, this is a prison and like, I'm just a dog in a cage. And once people get out, they have an extremely hard time not just going back into the behaviors and comforts of lifestyle that they were adhering to prior to going to prison, because they lack self-awareness. Self-awareness ends up being what allows you to make these proper adjustments, you know? Yeah, I mean, because like consider how much harder it is to understand things and to learn things and to move through things when you are blind and bound. You know, when you lack an awareness, like it heightens other senses, the senses of like, okay, now I'm far more willing to learn than I ever was because I realize I don't know shit and I can't do anything without being open to it, right? Like how I was in my 20s. So like getting out of that victim mentality of like, oh, I'm just a dog in a cage is what allows you to stop seeing this experience as an entrapment, as us being stuck. We're all just waiting on some afterlife that's better, or we're all just waiting on some savior to come and make things better. That's not an actual reality. The actual reality is exactly what it is, but it's a matter of perception and what we do with that, right? Like I've said before, this is all just cultivating all of it together. In the game of Mario, you know, at first it can be frustrating because you're learning all of these different things that you've never learned before and you have to learn them in order to progress in the game. And then come the second level, you're like, this is all just the same shit, only even harder now. It just keeps getting harder, but it's all just the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. That is life. That is life. And the point of it is to teach you so that you don't have to go through all that stuff. By the time, like if you've ever watched people do playthrough, professional Mario players do playthroughs, it's absolutely wild because they don't miss a step. They don't miss a second. Everything that they do is on point. Perfect. Right? And that's what our experience is trying to get us to. You know, all of us have our highest potential, and our experiences are so personal in order to get us to reach that. But it's all what we do and take with that. For the longest time, every time I looked in the mirror, I just hated myself. It's still easy for me to look at different things that I hate, to look at all of myself and be like, ugh, you know, but that's not going to help me get any better, right? The same thing, like forever I would avoid looking at my stomach or touching my stomach because it's like my least favorite part of my body. And I just would try to act like it didn't exist. But then, like, if I get butt naked in front of somebody I'm trying to be extremely intimate with because I very much deeply care for them and want to be that intimate with them, but now I'm suddenly incredibly insecure because I'm expecting of them to be accepting of something that I have yet to accept myself, and now I'm insecure because I also realize that, like, it's all I can think about. It must be all you can think about too, right? None of that ends up being healthy. That's all a toxic prescription to a perception of reality that doesn't truly exist outside of our own capacity to manifest that and to project those things into the manifestation. So it's very important that we know ourselves so that we aren't continuously given to those things, to those concepts, to those ways of being, to those perceptions and perspectives. We are in control of those things. You know, but we're not in control of the grandest experience because there are so many different parts of that experience, aspects of that experience. You know, the tiny little nut or bolt on, you know, the seat of a bike is not what makes the entire bike move and go and be productive and be as fast as it is and be able to stop on a dime and to be able to do all of these things. It's the bike as a whole. The second you don't have those nuts, the second you don't have those chains, the second you don't have those pedals, the second you don't have those handles, all of that different stuff, it affects the ultimate functionality of that bike. You know, you need all of those parts in order to have it be what it is. And all of those parts need to be functioning properly in order for it to function properly. But each of those individual aspects holds its own purpose, holds its own definitive quality, holds its own need as to what it requires in order to be its best, and then what the function of it is in order to be its best within the realm of the collective. Everything is a metaphor. Life is a metaphor. Everything is a metaphor for everything else. You know, if you're willing to take those things and to process those things and to look at things, you'll start to see things differently. You're not looking through these eyes. You're seeing things for what they really are. You know, it's not something to be afraid of. The only reason that these concepts are something we fear is because we've been brainwashed to believe that we should fear them. You have to be able to recognize that. I'm not trying to shit on religion. Again, like I keep saying, if that is if that is the crutch that you need in order to be able to walk on your own 2 feet, by all means, I'm not trying to dog that. How dare I say that somebody that doesn't have what I have now learned to have, only through those experiences myself, let alone for somebody that has an ailment that I've never dealt with and what they need to help themselves with that. I don't get to judge those things. I wouldn't be right to. All it would be doing would be taking energy away from my personal experience and my personal responsibility to myself to continue on with my experience. The best that I have is to be able just to engage with my experience enough that I can really understand it and then express it in such a way that hopefully that will help others to engage with their experiences in the same sort of regard, right? Okay, so that's what I got for that. That's my whole little spiel to begin with. This is the second video, by the way. You should know that by now. But okay, this isn't a prison. This is a source of education. Okay, random Tao excerpt. Tao Te Ching, excerpt 31. Fine weapons of war augur evil. Even things seem to hate them. Therefore a man of Tao does not set his heart upon them. In ordinary life, a gentleman regards the left side as the place of honor. In war, the right side is the place of honor. As weapons are instruments of evil, they are not properly a gentleman's instruments. Only on necessity will he resort to them. For peace and quiet are dearest to his heart, and to him even a victory is no cause for rejoicing. To rejoice over a victory is to rejoice over the slaughter of men. Hence a man who rejoices over the slaughter of men cannot expect to thrive in the world of men. On happy occasions, the left side is preferred. On sad occasions, the right side. In the army, the lieutenant commander stands on the left, while the commander-in-chief stands on the right. This means that war is treated on a par with a funeral service. Because many people have been killed, it is only right that survivors should mourn for them. Hence, even a victory is a funeral. That's wild, because that kind of takes it in the whole opposite perspective, right? So much of the core of my alchemy is to take what is perceived to be negative and to turn it into an active, workable positivity. And that comes from my concept of alchemy being you can create something out of nothing and that you turn shit into gold. However, an even deeper understanding of that is that the sense of reward that comes from those alchemizations is also only itself a part of the process. And I mean, it's weird because it's not like stating that war is essential. It's stating it as if it's inevitable, which is why it's not appropriate to take this sense of pride in it, because it's an inevitability. There's always going to be some winner and some loser in the way that this game works, and so it's most fitting to look at this whole sense of war as a funeral service. It's almost fitting to see all of this as a prison, because there's so many people that are entrapped, and there's so many people that are lost, and there's so many people that when they get out do just go back to the same things they always knew. And that is an issue for me, because like I don't like this. I have zero respect for the prison system in America, to be honest, at this point. Like, unless you are sending people into a space where they can be properly educated, where they can have access to therapy, consistent therapy, where they, are free to be able to truly learn themselves, express themselves, and learn something better to do with themselves truly. Not just like, oh, you might get benefits if you go to school and learn these things. There's so many different opportunities in prison. I get it. But it's not enough. Like, it's also so many of our prisons in America are run by gangs, and it's all just a matter of keeping these people off the streets. And so many tax dollars go into that when, like, I don't want people kept off the streets. I want these people to be able to be on the streets and to be better than what they were prior. You know what I mean? I don't want people kept in cages. That doesn't fulfill the ultimate goal of having us live in a sustainable society. That's not sustainable. You might as well just kill all of those people off if that's what you're going to do with them. That's insane. Like, we have the resources to be able to make the most. We just don't tend to use them that way. And that's largely in part because we have so many blood-sucking vampires sucking off of that system in order to only benefit themselves. You know? But that's why someone who follows a sense of sustainability isn't given to those things. There's a place for something greater than that. And that's something that I've also been considering for a long time and trying to move towards is how can I create a more sustainable system? How can I affect this system in a more sustainable fashion? How can I encourage people without the need of these large systems of control in order to become awakened unto themselves, in order to kind of build from the ground up, right? You know, which isn't something that obviously, like, generally when that's happening in a prison, it's because there's some gang or mafia affiliated with it. But if those things can be so prevalent within the prison system, why couldn't a cult or a gang or an affiliation for good also be? Well, because our general concept of those things isn't that. And that's largely in part, like, I care very much about these secret societies for the fact that, like, I know the work that they've done in the world. I understand the point of the importance of the occult. I understand those things and I have respect for it. I really do. What I don't respect is how for generations now, since the dawn of America as we know it, those things have been used as a secret form of control in order to gain power for a very elite few, for the benefit of a few, and at the expense of the whole. And that is so ass backwards to me and unsustainable. And it just goes against everything that those things are supposed to be standing for. You know, like if we switched it around and we're able to the issue is that, like, most of the people in these brotherhoods aren't self-responsible people. They're people that are looking to make a quick buck, that want some influence, that want some power, that know that this is the way they're going to get it. And they're willing to do anything for it, including set themselves up for complete blackmail, do all these terrible, crazy things just to gain some sort of favor, and then put themselves in a bind forever. They will sell their souls for that. I do not want these systems of control that enforce and insist that people sell their souls. That's why I also have an issue with all of the industries I've tried to be a part of. I came back to Austin in order to try to help separate people from that system of soul-sucking, soul-selling control tactics in order to bring people back to their true creative core and their true creative aspect, and to help them come back in tune with their highest power. Because I believe in the essentialism of creative force and creativity and creators. That is everything. That is everything. That's what has created the world in which we exist, is creation, creators, the capacity to be able to create. That to me is of the utmost importance. And it's like the final frontier, but it is also being, and like the people speaking at rallies and stuff like that right now that are gaining all of this favor and sense of control. If you think that they're not part of this system already, that they haven't already sold their souls in order to get a certain amount of favor, you're not looking clearly. You're not seeing things clearly. Because are they building something truly sustainable, or are they willing to kill off certain groups? Are they actually trying to, like, bring everything into some sense of cohesion and sustainability? Or are they sacrificing certain aspects of humanity just to gain some personal favor for themselves on the concept that they know better than anybody else? I mean, we really have to look at these things clearly and see them for what they really are. Now, I don't fear anything that's going on that way. I don't fear the influence these people have, because I'm aware that if it's unsustainable, it isn't gonna be able to continue forever. It's only for a time. And the things in my life that have been torturous and that have led me into suffering have been truly unsustainable, because you can't just suffer forever. And we are moving into a point in time where we are connecting with our highest power, whether we want to or not. Those that fight it because they want to stay in their lower power will find themselves absolutely broken down and at a loss. And that will be for the benefit of the whole, which is what, that's how survival works. That's ultimately, like, if you really know the math and the science of things, like, you would just fall into certain standards and behaviors and lifestyles for the fact that you're aware that those things, being rich and powerful and stuff, like, it only lasts for a time. It's not ultimately the most sustainable thing. Valuing yourself by followers, by influence, by money, and having those things be what you think power is, like, money is power in the matrix, but everything is actually energy far beyond that. And if you are in control of your energy, you don't need money. You don't need money to survive and to be okay and to be happy. And most of those people are fucking really miserable. They're not truly happy. That's why they can talk so much shit, because that's what they're full of. Okay, so I'm not concerned about those things, to be clear. And I don't think that you should concern yourself with those things either. I think that any concern or worry given in that direction, or even any, right now what we have is a whole bunch of people concerned and worried, and a whole bunch of people sucking dick about it. All of that's just supporting nonsense. I'm just not going to be a part of it. I'm not in a prison. This is a school. However, I can treat it like a funeral. I understand that. I'm not one to really, I'll cry. I do cry. The other night I was weeping about the state of the reality. It was actually just the day before the last Trump rally. I didn't know that was happening because I don't pay attention to those things. I only heard about it because it was all over the fucking internet the next day. But the night prior to that, I was broken down. Not just about personal things, but about things as a whole, and the fact that the capacity to be broken exists that way, where, like, it's not just, and then I came to it. I continued to weep. I continued to let out my emotions, to express myself and to work that out. But a lot of it wasn't even like, it wasn't poor pitiful me and I feel so bad and I just wish things were better. It was like, or that, that I wish that the world was better and that, like, I just can't handle it being like this. Like, it wasn't like that. It was like, I'm just aware that, like, there needs to be a time and space for all things. And so, like, it can't be hunky-dory all the time. And if I feel some type of way, it's very important that I express those things. Even if it's like, I'm not going to sit here and validate me feeling bad, but I needed to cry. So I did, yeah, that, I think, so but at the same time, like, a funeral to me is a celebration of life, a celebration of transition, a celebration of the fact that something existed for a time and you get to embrace that legacy and be excited for that legacy and honor it. And then it's also, the mourning kind of comes in being able to come together in order to receive and accept and move forward in a new direction without those things that way any longer, right? Things aren't going to be the same. And we have to accept that, and we have to be willing to move forward. And that's the point of mourning. Not just to cling to something that's already gone. That's not helpful, and that's the biggest thing. I think it's natural for us to want to do that because we feel a sense of loss, and that's why we mourn. But truly, the point of mourning is to accept the loss and to move forward in a better direction despite that loss, right? And then to incorporate that into your utmost being. And And that's what we're seeing right now. It's like a bloodbath, like we're watching the murder happen, right? And then will be the funeral, and everybody's going to be in mourning. It's going to be very dark seeming. But at the same time, like, that's all part of the light coming to fruition. That's all part of this process. And in the end, things are going to be significantly better than we've ever seen them to be. So I'm not afraid of that. I'm not concerned about it. I have the utmost faith in what the future holds. This is just the time we happen to be in. And so I try my best to enjoy it and appreciate it. I don't know if I even need to do a reading. Maybe this reading will be separate. Well, I mean, right now it's coming out, so I guess we'll see. Okay. The Star in the upright. And the King of Wands in reverse. There's things that have to happen. These things are all part of a cycle. You know, he has the Ouroboros here on his throne multiple times. He's wearing the Ouroboros all over his cloak. And there's actually a little lizard right down here. These things are built into this system, and that's why they have to play themselves out. It's just part of the process. It's just part of the process. But ultimately, this is what's happening. You know, even when the star is upside down, or on its side, or backwards, it's still the same. It still looks exactly the same. Because ultimately, there is goodness that's going on. Ultimately, this is all for our greatest good. Ultimately, there is a balance here between our emotions and our physical aspect, between our spirituality and our physicality, between, you know, the light and the dark, between the physical and the intangible. And we're naked. We're raw. Our experience of it is something extremely pure. You know? Like, it's so crazy because even as I'm saying that too, okay, there's several things in this. Even as I'm saying that, I'm recognizing that, like, these little flowers that are growing up, these little weeds or whatever that are growing up, they're not, I call them weeds. I did call them weeds. And that's what they can be perceived as, but they're also flowers, and they're plants. They're almost in the shape of the Satanic Cross, and that is important for the sense that, like, even our utmost carnality, as we perceive it to be, is essential in the growth of all things, is essential in this aspect of experience of all things. All things are essential. That's why I don't give power to evil. This is why I do not give power to evil, because I don't believe in it. All things are truly good. It's your responsibility to believe that and to prove it to yourself. And to, you don't, I mean, who cares if you prove it to others? It's their responsibility to believe and then prove it to themselves too. All things work out for good to those who love good. You know, and I just find it very interesting because, like, there's this little bird on this tree, and it kind of looks like a dodo bird to me. An extinct species, right? And it's like the last of its kind, which makes me want to cry. There's this video that I have seen of a bird that they already believe to be extinct, and so it's like the last one that they have ever been aware of because they hadn't seen it for a long time, and they happen to see this one, and it's the last known bird of its species, and it is doing a mating call. And it's just like, there's something so innate in our nature to do that, to survive, right? But, like, this bird is calling to someone who doesn't exist. He's calling out into the void. He's just calling out into the void. There isn't going to be somebody answering that call. And it's kind of like the last of The Last Unicorn, which I haven't seen, but I saw a little excerpt of the other day, and it was heartbreaking, and I was like, oh man, I want to watch this, but I also feel like it would absolutely wreck me. But it's that concept that, like, there's the last of a dying breed. But it's on the top of this tree. There's still so much life. There's still so much to be had. There's all these stars. Like, it's something very good. It's part of life. It's just part of life. It's part of the experience. It's just how things go and how things are. It's nothing to fear. There's so much more after this, beyond this. Once I'm gone in the physical, I'm dead, because that's the word that we have for what happens when you transition beyond the physical, right? My body will be gone. And so many people know me as my body. So many people know me as these tangible qualities that exist within me. And for those people, when I'm gone, they will experience a sense of loss. But for those few that know better, that know themselves, I'll continue to exist through them and through all things, because I already do. The deeper I get in myself and the more connected I get in myself to the grander reality, the longer I exist, the more I exist, the more powerful I exist in that sense, in the sense that I am truly connected to all of these external things and all of these internal things. And when this external body is gone, then only the internal will exist any longer. Out in the external, I'll exist even more, even greater. So I don't fear these things. I really don't. My only goal is always to bend. And like, even when I didn't know what I was doing and was being very selfish and was out of my fucking mind, it was still a driving force of me to leave the world better than I found it. That was why I wanted to become a missionary, right? It's why I've cared to just like take of my experiences and not let them destroy me, and to learn how to love through those things so that I can teach others. I care very much about leaving this place better than I found it. But I've also come recently to the realization that that is beyond my control, because my time here is limited. I trust that I have done a good work and that it will speak for itself. But I also don't necessarily think I'm going to be here to see it. I think much like Moses leading the Israelites through the wilderness for 40 years, only to have... He did it. He did everything he was supposed to. But he also did things he wasn't supposed to, out of his own selfish heart, right? And the consequences of that was that he wasn't able to see paradise. He had to watch the Israelites go into it while he died on a mountain. I've embraced that concept as well. It'd be great. I'm already receiving so many blessings, so it's not like I'm like codependently believing that I need to have that as any sense of validation. I already am receiving of mine. And I've actually was told back when I was like first coming out of Christianity that part of my faith was to be able to embrace the fact that I could spend my eternity separated from God, and that wouldn't change. Like, I wouldn't. I can't. I can't be separated from God, for the fact that, like, even if I were to do it, just releasing Christianity, releasing this sense of salvation, even if I wasn't saved, even if there is no guarantee of heaven and this afterlife that way, that, like, the work that I'm doing is still essential. And that's what really matters. And to do it anyways, because that's what keeps me in alignment with God. And, yeah. I'm just not afraid. It's crazy because, yeah, even that, like, my concepts have changed so much of things. And, like, this isn't, like, a brag session. Like, I always just want people to know, like, if I wanted to kill myself most of my life, from the time I was 8 and started in Christian schools to the time that I was 28, 30, and, I was lost, and I did have a death wish, and I was actively trying to kill myself. I spent 4 different stints in a mental hospital assessing my PTSD because I kept trying to kill myself. So, like, I know what that's like. And to be where I'm at now, where those just aren't That's just not where I'm at. That's so far removed from who I am. The thing that keeps me connected to it is the fact that I understand why people could feel those ways because I've been there. You know, I haven't separated myself so much that it's like I get to damn everybody else for being the ways that I've been in my past, like a lot of Christians tend to do, right? It's not like that. I care very much for people. I don't want to see people where I've been. I don't want to see people at my lows. But I also, like, I'm not trying to control that. And I'm not trying to control it even in my own mind of this sense that, you know, that whatever, like, that I don't think that that's, you know, this person shouldn't go through this thing because that's an innately bad thing. I don't believe that. It's not for me to decide those things. I trust that whatever anybody's learning in their life right now is very purposely for them. And it's essential to their growth. And it's essential to the ultimate sustainability of our being. All of our being. And that this is just a time and place. And it's momentary. And the experience of it is momentary. And the best thing that I have is to make the most of it and to appreciate it to its fullest. And to embrace every aspect of it. The good, the bad, the, you know, pain, the happiness, like all of it. And that's just what that's ultimately, I already trust that that's where people will get, but like, and I'm not trying to push things, you know, I can be patient, but that is my end goal. That is what I'd like to see. And again, like, you know, I don't have to see it. I already can trust in it. So that's the reading. I read 2 cards. This whole thing was really just, me communicating different ideas. So I might not even call this part of my tarot readings. I might put this as something else. Have it be its own little separate thing. But yeah, hopefully this is beneficial to you to some degree, that it brings you some peace and some motivation to just embrace yourself more fully, to embrace your experience more fully, and that it enlightens you to be able to move forward with a brighter perspective and a deeper love for yourself and for the world in which you exist, which is a reflection of yourself. Okay, see you in the next video.